The opinions expressed on this program are solely those of its hosts, guests, or callers, and do not necessarily represent the opinions of WTBR-FM, its management, other producers, or sponsors.
Hi, everyone. You're listening to Backstory. Let's hear it on WTBR-FM Pittsfield with Roberta McCulloch-Dews of the Mayor's Office in the city of Pittsfield. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you all are doing well and all cleared out from all the snow that we've had in recent days. Today, we have with us Jenny Herzog, and Jenny is the founder and president of Chaos Theory. And Chaos Theory is a new Pittsfield-based nonprofit that uses the arts to facilitate a platform for the voices and stories of community members. So that's really interesting. And I just want to welcome Jenny for being here today because I know the weather has been crazy in recent days. So thank you, Jenny.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So you are a newcomer to the Berkshires. How long have you been here?
Yes, about just over a year.
Ooh, that's really, really new.
I'm new. I'm brand new.
You're new.
I'm being initiated as we speak.
Okay. All right. So where was home before the Berkshires?
So I lived in Boston area for the last 8 years.
Okay. And how did you like Boston?
I liked it a lot. It's a great city, very livable city, lots of different neighborhoods, different diverse things to do. So it was great, but I wanted a change in lifestyle.
So it's definitely a big change, obviously, because, you know, you're going from a metropolitan city to a community that is more, I like to say we're a small county where everyone seems to know everyone. Has that been your experience?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Do tell.
Well, I moved out here last fall and I landed in the gun violence prevention program over at 18 Degrees. And through that work, I kind of got placed right into this web of all these people who work together. And I started meeting people in the community. And, you know, this person knows this person who knows this person. And then this is their cousin or their friend. And before you know it, you know half the city.
Exactly. It is definitely one of those. I mean, you know, so Pittsfield is a city of about, let's say 44,000. But yeah, I mean, it's a community where everyone knows everyone. And even within the county, so many connections. What I have found, my family, we've been here for about 13 years this June. And what I have found is that the benefits of being in a county like this is that the collaboration is phenomenal. And if you are, especially coming from a large city like Boston, it's a totally different experience. You have pockets of collaboration, but it's not the same.
Absolutely.
You can walk virtually as an unknown in Boston for weeks and months
and years
at a time.
And I did.
Yeah, exactly. And what you find in the Berkshires is that there is this sense of camaraderie.
Yeah. And I've also found that people are super open to new ideas, to helping promote, connecting you. Just been open-armed, embracing kind of the new ideas and things.
All right. So I have to ask, considering your life's work, I went over just like your bio and just some, research on you. I mean, a lot of your work has to do with social justice. It's tinged with just this restorative element as well as the art. So there's this fusion of those two worlds. I need to know, where did you grow up? I need to know more about your childhood. I need to know, how did you become the person that you are today? So where did you grow up?
I'm from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Oh, wow.
So if you don't know it, it's a college town. It's where University of Michigan is. It's a very picturesque kind of college town bubble, lovely place to grow up. Very, I can't complain at all about my childhood. It was great.
Okay, so after I graduated college, I interned at the Freep.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I lived in Detroit for a summer. And so I knew of Ann Arbor, but yeah, I was definitely in Detroit for that summer.
Wow, great.
Yeah. So that's my connection to Michigan.
Nice.
All right, so were you an only child?
So I have an older sister.
Okay.
And in terms of the social justice stuff, my dad's a law professor. And my mom is a human rights kind of person. So she's on the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission. She does that kind of work. She's a mediator. And my sister does education policy. So
there we go.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me a typical night around the dinner table. What were conversations like?
Gosh. Well, my dad's an extreme introvert.
Okay.
He's been sitting in the same spot on the couch for 35 years. It's like indented. So he would be pretty quiet and or talk about the news, things going on. He knows everything about everything in the country.
Okay.
My mom asks a lot of questions about everything. But, you know, lots of talk about the news. I guess from an early age, I was aware of things going on in the country. There was a sense, my mom especially has like a restlessness, a desire to help, to learn about people, to kind of, you know, get out in the community and do things. So
Yeah.
just an energy around that.
Did you have a defining moment at any time where, I mean, obviously all these conversations were happening around you. Did you ever say, wow, what's that about? Or was there something that struck you as just like really profound?
You know, not necessarily. I grew up doing theater and music and all that kind of stuff, but I was always very intrigued by just people who are different than me. I wouldn't say that I was like, oh, this particular issue or this social justice thing going on in the news, but it was just like a desire to learn about things that I wasn't familiar with, and just being exposed to different ideas, different ways of life, different problems, and kind of a restlessness. That's the word I kind of keep coming back to.
It would seem like your parents kind of set this example in sort of this really unintentional way, that they just sort of lived their lives and maybe had these discussions around you. In high school, what were some of the activities that you were a part of? Because I go back to your life's work, and we're going to get into your life's work right now, but it's pretty deep. So, I mean, there's theater and there's performing and there's, you know, all the plays and all the fun things. And you obviously at some point make the switch to get into the heavy stuff of life.
Right.
So was there a foreshadowing of anything like high school that we could tell what your future life would be like?
That's a great question. I would say there was definitely a turning point, like you say. Like, I kind of grew up in this bubble. I was exposed to ideas, but it was very much a bubble. And I was super active in theater, music, choir, tap dance was big, still is. But I did get super active at this place called the Peace Neighborhood Center that did after-school programming for kids in Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor. And I was a mentor and a tutor for younger kids, and that was always a highlight of my week. Not necessarily for any particular reason, except that it did get me out of my bubble a little bit. It wasn't until I left home, went to college, that I started to step more out. And it wasn't until like I moved to Boston that I really stepped out. So it's kind of a gradual thing, but I would say the first 18 years of my life were very much just like the bubble.
If we could delve a little bit more into the bubble, what would you say the bubble afforded you?
Yeah. Certain ignorance. I was able to really like get deep into the arts and the activities that I loved. And explore a lot of different things and gain a real sense of like who I was. And I think that's what that period of my life was. And then it started to turn more externally later.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay. Mentoring is huge. I am a mentor as well, a youth mentor. And so I know the power of that. When you were at the Peace Neighborhood Center, were you hearing stories from young people? And at the time, were these stories were they in direct contrast to maybe some of the things that you were experiencing in the bubble?
You know, they were younger kids.
Oh, like how young?
Elementary and early middle school.
Oh, they're young, okay.
So it wasn't so much like discussing problems. It was more just like really fun to hang out with them and intrigued by their lives. Sometimes I would go to their houses and I would be exposed to their families and different ways of life like that, but it wasn't ever like a particular social justice thing.
Why was it called the Peace Neighborhood Center?
free programming for families who needed it. I'm not sure. I guess
I mean, because the name is so it's rich with a lot of sort of like themes, like Peace Neighborhood Center. It makes me think of just a place, a calming place, a place where young people can come and find, I don't know, refuge of the sort.
I think that's true for sure.
Okay. So, all right. So you have sort of this background in theater, the arts, music. You're also doing the mentoring. And then you decide to go away to college. You went to Vassar.
I did. I started at Vassar.
You started at Vassar,
This is when the restlessness really set in.
So let's talk about the restlessness and what made you leave the state and say, I'm going to Poughkeepsie.
Oh, yeah. Well, I never thought I would stay in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
I don't know why exactly. I just wanted to leave.
Okay.
I think the Vassar thing was like, oh, it's a small artsy liberal arts school, but I can still go to New York City and take tap classes and be exposed to the arts there. And it's kind of this contrast. When I got there, it was like very much a switching point in my life because I was like, this place is so weird. It's like a gated, it's just too perfect. I was freaked out by it. I was like, the gardens are perfect, surrounded by a metal gate. Like everyone is between the ages of 18 to 21. You have too much time to study. It's just too perfect.
Wait 1 second. So are you telling me that perfection was irritating to you?
Yeah, it made me deeply uncomfortable.
Did it?
And you know what? Looking back, I'm like, I wish I could have just like studied and not been so restless at that time of my life, but it just felt so unnatural. I felt like I was released in like the Sims computer game or like you are the chosen students who are coming to this perfect bubble land to study.
Wow.
And it was too weird. I didn't like it.
All right. So I know because you left Vassar.
I did.
And you went to NYU. And I was like, when I was looking up your background again, I was like, oh, she's a fellow NYU alum.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, you went to Gallatin. I went to CAS. We have some years in between us. Because I'm class of 2000.
Okay.
But the city, I'm thinking the city probably was appealing to you for maybe one of the reasons why it was appealing to me. It was a city.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you like your experience when you transferred from and left Poughkeepsie?
Yes.
And went to the Village?
Yeah. Much better.
Okay.
I wanted to drop out of college entirely, but my parents wouldn't let me. They're very academically oriented. So I was like, well, I'll go to NYU because then I can do my classes but be living in the city, experience other things. And it was great. Gallatin, the School of Individualized Study, gave me a lot of freedom to like craft things as I saw fit and then leave campus and go exploring.
Yeah, because you got your BA in structure and chaos.
Yes, and it has a much more pretentious full name if you'd like to hear it.
Oh my gosh, what is the full name?
It's really horrible.
Oh my gosh.
Navigating Chaos and Structure in Pursuit of Freedom and Art. So my thinking was like,
okay,
like why systems are the way they are, how things are created and destroyed, where boundaries, and I was studying opera at the time, which I felt was very rigid, and then I was studying jazz, which felt more free.
Yes.
It's like contrasting these systems.
Wow. Well, yeah, if there was ever a place for you to sort of craft and design your own path, Gallatin would be the place. You know, you have this arts background. Everything is rich. I'm waiting for the aha moment where, and maybe it's when you focused on the structure and the chaos that you said, wait, I'm going to make sure that my life does not look like a Sims storybook narrative here. And I'm going to make sure that everything that I do in life sort of has that depth and has that meaning. Was it when you were in your undergrad program that you realized I'm going to carve out a totally different life than maybe one that I thought I would?
You know, that's a great question. And I would say that at this point in my life, early 20s, my life was a case study in chaos. I did not have the awareness of what I was going to be doing in a year, 5 years. I was all over the place, like personally, mentally, emotionally. So everything was just like up in the air, rearranging. I was running around the city, making bad choices. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
like,
hear
not
you.
in the way you might think, but just
no,
like
I hear you. I mean, listen, you're growing up, and I always like to say, some people have the quad. Well, you have the village.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's like the backdrop. So I get it. But I think part of that landscape, you get to see everyone and everything.
Absolutely.
There is no gated.
Yeah, and I loved that.
Exactly.
Yeah, you leave your door and you don't know what you're going to see, and you see a million things by the time you get home.
That is correct.
Yeah, and I liked not having control over what was going to happen and just kind of being at the whimsy of the city.
Yeah, that absolutely. I mean, you definitely see everything. You experience a ton, and it stays with you.
Right.
So you're figuring out life. You're doing your own thing. You're growing up.
And
right?
at this point, too, I was dating this guy who was renting a room in a Bangladeshi apartment in Harlem. Okay. So it was like, and at the time I was like, this is fine. This is totally normal. And so we would go in there and they'd be like cooking lamb stew, praying.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing.
Because he was Bangladeshi.
No.
Okay.
It was so random.
Right.
He found this room on Craigslist, but it was like in Harlem on 111th Street above the mosque or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. But so I was just in this apartment, like I would stay there and then I would bike down the West Side Highway to NYU. And that was my life. And it seemed normal at the time. Yeah. And now I'm like, what the heck was I doing?
But isn't it amazing? Like some of the things that you look back, you're like, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah, it feels like another life.
Another life. Seriously. Okay, wow. I'm sure you have more stories like that.
I do, unfortunately.
But you made it through, though.
I did.
You made it through. You completed your program. And then after graduation, because again, listening to you now, you basically maybe didn't have that 5-year plan.
Right.
So what was your next step?
Yeah, so no plan. I was renting a room in Brooklyn, dog walking, nannying, teaching after-school programs.
Was this like Brooklyn, like rents are high Brooklyn, or were you still able to get like a good, decent room?
This was... So Craigslist is my thing.
Okay.
I like to think of myself as the Craigslist queen. So I room hopped.
Okay.
From like Fort Greene, Lower East Side, Harlem, Williamstown, Bushwick, like Cobble Hill. So it was I didn't have much to compare it to because I had gone from like college dorms to New York rent.
Yeah.
So it was expensive. And I remember someone at the time being like, in other cities you can get a whole apartment for this price. I'm like, no way.
See, I was always curious about people who rented rooms. One, I probably would, just being so skeptical. I think that's the New Yorker in me. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
And Craigslist too?
Well, that would have been smart. I mean, this is a character flaw. I'm very trusting.
Yeah, I was like, it's almost like it should say like stay away. Craigslist, like a room, like, okay.
Yeah.
You're the killer.
Right. Well, it worked out. I found a lot of places to live. I had a lot of experiences. And
everyone was good.
Yeah, they were.
All right. Did you find that you paid like a ton of money though for your one room?
It wasn't unbearable.
Okay.
It was too much, but it wasn't it was not sustainable for the long term.
So you did that for a while. You sort of did like, they call it here, I think, the Berkshire Shuffle, I think.
Yeah, I did that.
So you kind of did like the Brooklyn Shuffle.
Yeah, and I never lived in a place this is the first time in my life now that I've lived anywhere longer than a year.
Really?
Like any apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so back to the restlessness thing.
Well,
but at that point, I was like, okay, I'm dog walking, I'm babysitting, I'm living in this random room. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And I had always had this dream of being a professional singer. So I'm like, I know, I'll go to a conservatory and then I'll become a professional singer. So I applied to grad school, and that's how I ended up in Boston.
Right, because you went to the New England Conservatory, right?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And I went to the improvisation program, which is kind of the equivalent of Gallatin for music.
Ah, so you were, by all accounts, you were going to be a singer.
Theoretically.
Uh-huh. All All right, so we're going down the path now of, Jenny is going to be a singer. She is, sharpening her chops. So at some point, Jenny decides that Jenny is not going to be a singer.
Indeed.
When did Jenny decide this?
The second year of grad school.
Okay, what happened? Tell me.
Yeah, so it was kind of back to that same Vassar experience, but less intense.
Yeah.
Like a conservatory environment where everyone is like 24/7 music. What is my authentic voice as an artist? Like very self-oriented, and it was amazing. Like I met a lot of amazing people. I got to study music for 2 years. I don't regret it at all. I was part of the community program where we'd go and do concerts and workshops. But when I finished, the second year, I was like, okay, the community engagement program was what I was really into.
Yeah.
And then I finished school and I was like, well, going and singing in bars and restaurants doesn't really seem that interesting or like.
So let's go back to the community engagement part. You said that was See, I'm seeing a tie-in, right? We're going back to the Peace Neighborhood Center, and then we're going back to the community engagement. And obviously, there's something there that it's stoking your interest.
Yeah.
What was it when you were there and you were singing? I don't know if you were encouraging or like having the people who were there like sing along with you. I don't know the layout of it, but what was it about those experiences that stayed with you?
I mean, it's the getting out of the bubble thing. It's the being exposed to different people, different ways of life, different parts of the community, and bringing what I love into those spaces and sharing it with people who maybe aren't as exposed to it as often.
And when you were in those spaces, Jenny, I got to ask, because I feel like sometimes when we know something is a winner, you have that feeling, right? You're like, okay, this is it. And so did you have that moment where when you were in those spaces, you said, this is it for me?
Yeah. I would say it was more like when I would kind of get into I wasn't depressed, but I was just like, and then I would get into those spaces and I would be like, this feels right, this feels good. Like meeting these people, talking to these people, singing with them, dancing with them, like it just felt good. And I don't think that at the time I could really put my finger on what it was or why, but got me out of myself, got me out of my head, got me out of like my routine.
So okay, so before we go into the next part, I just want my listeners to know that my guest today is Jenny Herzog, and she is the founder and president of Chaos Theory, a new Pittsfield-based nonprofit that uses the arts to facilitate a platform for the voices and stories of community members. And we're just getting into sort of her pathway to her life's work. So, all right, so you sort of have this epiphany that you're like, I'm liking how this feels. I like the rhythm. I like the feeling. And you make a leap because, you definitely do some other things, I think, after graduation. You have a moment where you do some other work, but you end up at some point at the Pelham Academy.
I do, yeah.
And the Pelham Academy, it's a therapeutic residential school, and it's affiliated with the Justice Resource Institute. We're going to have Jenny tell us about that. But Jenny did everything there. She did music, she did dance, she did theater, she did yoga, creative writing, life skills. I was going to say kickboxing, but there's no kickboxing in there. I just want to add something else in the mix. It just feels like she did everything. But so she was like a Renaissance woman doing everything. But obviously this was some heavy work because you're dealing with young people who have a lot. I need to know, how did you become affiliated with this group? And then I want you to talk about the work that you did.
Yeah. So every time I would go into a new job or a new project, it came from a sort of like, I don't know, boredom, depression, too much in my own head, too much thinking about myself, and just searching for something and kind of thrusting myself into whatever that new experience or job or project is. Yeah. So I was literally just like on one of those job search sites, like arts and education. Okay. And it popped up. And yeah, it was a therapeutic residential school serving teenage girls with histories of complex trauma who came from all around the Northeast and were placed through the school system and or DCF. So it was a very interesting place. They lived upstairs and went to school downstairs. And there was 24/7 like staff and no doors on the rooms, like no privacy, lots of like diverse range of challenges and needs and things like that. And I was one of the classroom teachers. I was the non-academic arts teacher. So I kind of got the freedom to do whatever kind of projects I wanted in that room.
So I got to ask a couple things. One, what was your initiation into all of this? I mean, did they say, okay, Jenny, this is your class, have at it? And then you stand there and you're like, hi, I'm Jenny, your teacher. Like, how did that go? Did they receive you?
That is actually pretty much how it went, to be honest. And I was like, how did I get this job? Who hired me? Why wasn't I trained better? And what the heck am I doing here? But I'm like, whatever. So, I mean, anyone who works with this kind of demographic knows that they're not like, it's lovely to meet you, Miss Jenny. We're so happy to tap dance today.
They probably were like,
Yeah. No, they're like, when are you going to get a bra that fits? Are you pregnant? I'm going to throw my desk at you. Like, you're not qualified for this job. I mean, all the stuff. And to be honest, I love that. Like, I love young people who just say whatever they want.
Right.
Like, I prefer that to like being very cultivated in society. So it was fine. I mean, some of their comments I took to heart.
Yeah.
I do have a mug that says kindness is magic.
Yeah.
That a student picked up and threw at the board and is now indented, which I think is hilarious.
Okay.
But, they're testing you. And they want to see if you're going to keep showing up.
Yep.
And how you're going to react.
Yeah.
If you're going to hold the boundary. And so I learned that. It was just like learning by exposure and showing up every day and trying my best to do art stuff with them. And over time, we gained a mutual respect, I would say.
So was it literally, I'm thinking, it's so bad that this is like my point of reference, right? So many movies in my head. I think about like Sister Act. Mm-hmm. and they were not troubled children. They were just unruly.
Right.
But, it took a while for them to warm up to, what was it, Sister Mary Catherine? Mm-hmm. How did you find that trust? How did you find it to grow and to build and develop? Was it one where you would see over time they would maybe stop by your desk and say, "All right, Miss Jenny," or however they called you, Miss Herzog. I'm not sure what they said, but Miss Jenny, like, you're cool. Or like, I get you. Or maybe it was more like they didn't throw the mug that day and you're like, yes, this is good.
You know what it is? Which is so funny because I've never articulated this. But it was like they would insult you, but then they would smile and like there'd be like a twinkle in their eye. Like, I'm just messing with you. Like it goes from a straight up insult to like a sarcastic insult. And that's how you know you've like made it.
Right. You're like, now I have arrived.
And also like I would push them to do things that were uncomfortable in terms of like the arts, right? Like improvising a scene, doing a creative writing prompt. Like I used to start every day with morning pages. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically they would come into my room, I'd be playing music and they would do like just free write.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh, I hate this. This is such bullshit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course, they're going to like censor you now.
Right. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. That's okay. That's why we have the fabulous editors here.
My bad.
Who helped. But thank you.
Anyway, but then they would either be like, did you read my morning pages?
Yeah.
Or like, are we going to do the morning pages today? So it's like, they liked it.
Yeah. Well, so the funny thing is I remember when I was in junior high school, we didn't call it morning pages. They just called it free writing. And I'll never forget, I did have a teacher. His name was Mr. Wool, and he was an English teacher. And I remember he would say, all right, grab your journals and just write. And same thing. We're like, why do you have to write? Like, of course, it was like, write about what? I think the question always was like, what are we writing? Are you going to be reading it? Do we have to read out aloud? Like, and it was like, just write. And the concept of simply writing at the time was like, with no agenda. It was radical. But I think what it does is it allows you to connect with your inner self.
Yeah.
So you are helping them to connect with their inner person in a way that maybe they hadn't done so before. It could have been like corny to them, like, what are we writing? But then after a while, you're like, you actually start to write down your thoughts and you start to maybe even give it a structure all your own because it's your own words.
Right.
So that's pretty deep. Did you have any days when you're like, all right, this is why I'm doing this? And like those days where, you had your hard days and the days where you're like, I escaped the mug and it did not reach my head today. Great. But those days where you're like, this was a pretty awesome day. Did
Totally.
you have?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you really get to know the students because they don't censor themselves and they don't hold anything back.
Yeah.
And you're with them all day, every day. So it's like you see the way they're changing and growing. You see pushing them out of their comfort zone or, things that they might be doing in class that they wouldn't have done before.
Yeah.
And again, it's like the lack of censorship and just, I don't know. I just got attached to them.
Was it hard for you to leave?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was time though, by the time, I left to move out here actually.
Yeah.
It was also during COVID. There was I worked there during COVID and they stayed open because it's a residential school.
Right.
So I kept going to work every day. So that was intense too.
Oh. Wow.
But I don't know. They're also just like you hear that would hear the stories of what they had experienced and what they'd been through before they got to Pelham.
Yeah.
And they're like 15, 14 years old and you're just like, oh my gosh. And yet they're still showing up every day and, doing a voice lesson with me or whatever. And it's just I learned a lot from them.
It seems like almost, they seem like inspiration of some sort. You said that word again, showing up. They show up. And I think in my own life, excuse me, I've seen people who they've gone through some of the worst situations and they continue to show up. And I often look at individuals like that and I'm like, yeah, you're my person that like I regard in such a high esteem because like you don't allow life to like knock you down and keep you there. So I could see how those young people could have that impact. Is there a way, like, are you in touch with any of them still? And like, how does that work? Like you have such an impact, you have such a relationship and then you leave and you're gone. Do you ever wonder what's happening with them?
Yeah. And while I was there, I actually started a 12-step group for ones who had struggled with addiction because there wasn't an addiction group there. And we got super close. And I'm still in touch with a few of them, but, you're not really supposed to be in their lives like that. It's kind of a moment in time.
Yeah.
You kind of got to close the door.
I know. That's hard. But though, it's almost like you plant your seed, right? You sort of, and I think that's almost, if you think about life, like a garden, right? Like along the way, we plant our seeds and sometimes you're not going to be around to actually see that seed sprout up. But your job maybe is just to plant the seed and someone else will actually see it manifest into like a beautiful flower.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. All right. So I just want to talk about some of your projects, excuse me, because you have an amazing portfolio of work for someone who did not have a plan, your 5-year, 10-year plan that so many of us have. You actually went on to do some amazing projects. 2 of them I want to see if you can talk a little bit about today. One is the Lullaby Project.
Oh, sure.
And then the other is Moving Stories.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the Lullaby Project. Is it what it sounds like? Kinda?
Yeah. So the Lullaby Project is through actually the Carnegie Hall education program, but they had an offshoot in Boston. And it's a program that pairs teaching artists or songwriters with mothers who may be in difficult situations, who have just had young children, babies, and it basically partners one songwriter / artist with one mother to write a lullaby for their new child.
What?
Yeah, so the artist meets with the mom. In this case, it was during COVID, so it was all virtual.
Yeah.
And I worked with a couple moms who told me about their children, we chose what style of music do you want it to be. I helped them write lyrics, and then I would work with them to craft a melody, and then I basically, orchestrated it, played piano, sang it, and gave them a copy for them to then sing to their child.
Now, Jenny, I got to ask, because this sounds real fancy. Is this like fancy? Am I like on the right page here? Is this like, someone says, I want my own lullaby for my child, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm going to have Jenny work with me on it.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty much what it was.
Okay, so how does one go about even finding out how to get their own lullaby for their child? Because I'm sorry, I got 3 kids, okay?
Yeah.
And it never came across my mind that I could actually have a personalized lullaby.
You can have anything today.
I'm sure. So what, did they like Google and find out that they could get this lullaby?
Well, so I don't know how the program had a roster of community partners that served these women.
Okay.
So they reached out to their community partners, do you serve any women who would be interested in writing a lullaby for their new child? And it was meant to be like an empowering thing for the mothers, a way for them to bond with their children.
Oh, I love it.
And take ownership over that.
So then let me ask you this then, because maybe it isn't as fancy-smashy as I'm thinking. Was it a way for the more I'm listening to you, was it... I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this in a way. Was it more of women who may not have always had access to certain things? Because when I think of someone Googling how to get my personalized lullaby, totally. I'm thinking like, wow, like I never really thought of that because I'm just trying to like make sure like my child is like fed and all these other things. But I'm listening to you and it seems like maybe this demographic was more of trying to foster bonds with the child.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. So it was women who may be experiencing homelessness or food insecurity, in recovery, that kind of thing. So they may be just dealing with their day-to-day lives. Yeah. And we came in as sort of like let's do a positive social thing for you and your child.
I love that. And there's nothing wrong with also paying for lullabies for your child if you so want that. It's just that, again, as a mom of 3, my mind just never went there. And so to know that this awesome resource was there for women who, again, with the challenges of life at their doorstep, how awesome this project was for them.
I hope so.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So
great.
Does it have like an iteration? Is it continuing? Or this is it?
I'm sure it's continuing. I'm not doing it anymore. I think they do it every year with different moms.
And when you craft the lullaby, do you own rights to it? No. So it's like you release it.
Yeah. It wasn't that professional. It was like I sang and played piano and sent them a recording.
Do you remember anything you did?
Oh, no.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
'Cause I didn't know if you want to give us like a taste.
It's somewhere in my phone, but I don't remember it.
Why do I think Jenny's like, yeah, I don't remember it. That's what I'm going to tell her. I really don't want to say it.
I'm trying to think if I do. If this had a part 2, I would go back and find it and sing it for you.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll find another occasion for you to sing the lullaby. But let's talk about move-in stories because I am utterly fascinated about that project. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So that was actually the turning point. That was right after grad school.
Yeah.
When I was like, what do I do now? And I ended up discovering this group of women called Moving Steps who had met while they were incarcerated in Framingham and formed a dance company on the inside. So they would meet and choreograph mostly hip-hop pieces.
Wow.
And then when they came back into the community, they continued to meet and dance together. So I discovered this group and I was like, that's fascinating. Like maybe I could do a tap dance workshop or like find some way to connect with them.
Wait, how did you discover them? Like, again, they're on the inside.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out you, Jenny, how are you discovering these folks? What's going on?
So I was literally back in Michigan, having just finished grad school with no life plan.
Yeah.
Googling like arts incarceration Boston.
Okay.
So I was like, I just need a sign right now.
Yeah.
What am I going to do next? And they popped up and I was just like, that's amazing. Like I want to get involved in some way. And another piece of this is that storytelling had always been something I was interested in.
Yeah.
Like, I grew up doing musical theater, But then in high school, I was in this philosophy class where every day one student in the room would go into this lazy boy in the front, and the whole class period was just asking that person questions about their life.
Really?
So they would just open up and tell you their most intimate, vulnerable like thoughts and feelings.
What?
And it was fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, this is so incredible. And I don't know why. And then when I discovered the Moth podcasts, similar thing, like a stranger getting up on stage and sharing this intimate story. And those two experiences had always stuck with me as like, it's so impactful to hear a stranger be vulnerable to a group of people. And it just creates some kind of energy that I loved. And so once I discovered Moving Steps, I was like, what could I do with them? And I ended up applying for a few grants to basically partner with them to craft a full-length show based on their life story, where they would craft like the Moth style stories from their life, and then we would weave those stories together with their choreography.
Wow.
So we ended up getting funding for that, not by any means much funding at all, but it was enough for them to start rehearsing with me every week. And
so wait, did you have to go to the...
So they were out at this time.
They were out at that time. So where did everyone meet?
Yeah, so we met at the Dance Complex in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So they came from like all over, like the North Shore, different parts of Boston.
Okay.
And I had no idea what I was doing.
But did they know that you had no idea?
No.
Okay, but see, that's good.
This is also a theme in my life. Like, like same as being in the class. Like, you just do the thing and then hope for the best.
I hear you.
Yeah. So we started rehearsing, doing storytelling, music, dance workshops. And over the course of about 9 months, we like collaboratively created this show. And they wanted to structure it in the 12-step model of experience, strength, hope. So they basically crafted stories around their their experiences with addiction and mass incarceration. And then we wove their stories together, and between them they would dance, or there would be music or things like that. And then we premiered this show, which we called Moving Stories, at the Dance Complex in Cambridge. And we went actually to perform at the place where they were incarcerated, South Middlesex Correctional. We performed for the women on the inside, which was amazing. And then we also performed at Wellesley College to a group of students, and it was an amazing experience.
Was it recorded in any way? Can someone see this if they want to see it?
Yeah, there's actually clips on my website.
Okay. What's your website?
JennyHerzog.com.
Okay.
And if you go to the Chaos Theory page, there's clips from that show there that you can look at.
All right. Yeah, that sounds so fascinating. All right. So, my guest today is Jenny Herzog. She is the founder and president of Chaos Theory. It is a new Pittsville-based nonprofit that uses the arts to facilitate a platform for the voices and stories of community members. And so she's just telling us a little bit about her path. Now, Jenny, I got to ask you, we've talked about the amazing projects that you've worked on. Tell us about Chaos Theory. First of all, the name itself is a conversation all its own. So do tell.
Yeah. So this is brand new. I actually just signed the paperwork before I came here.
Congrats to you.
So thank you. So this is a new nonprofit.
All right.
The name is Chaos Theory, which to me is about rearranging things. As a scientific concept, it also means that even when things appear random, there's an underlying order. There are patterns that exist. So to me, this means I can walk into a room with 10 people and work with each individual, whatever skills, talents, interests, stories they bring, and we can work as a group to arrange that material into a new structure. So kind of being willing to exist in the unknown and with whatever raw materials are in the room to create a brand new structure from scratch. So that's the premise of the name. The goal is to create really high quality productions based on real people and real stories. And my philosophy is that putting something honest on stage is actually more interesting than something that's highly cultivated and refined that may be dishonest.
Okay. And you've done some work with some Pittsfield stakeholders already. Who have you worked with?
Yeah, so most recently I was at the Gun Violence Prevention Program with 18 Degrees.
Okay.
And I produced a documentary called Hear Me, featuring 7 young people from the county who've been impacted by gun violence. So that was actually supposed to be a live show and became a film because of Omicron. So that project is just wrapping up. And now with this new nonprofit, I've got a handful of new projects, which I'd be happy to talk about.
All right.
I don't know if now's the time.
If you want to give us a taste, absolutely.
Sure. So I am doing a project at Eagle Academy, which is Pittsfield's alternative school, and we are making a very low-budget short film called If I Ran the City, where I'll be interviewing high schoolers about basically their commentary on Pittsfield, what they would like to see in our community, their experiences. And that will end with a private screening where we'll invite key stakeholders from the city to be in dialogue with the young people.
Okay.
And then I've got a project at DYS Westfield, Juvenile Detention Center, and that's actually where the teenage boys from Pittsfield go.
Okay.
So I'll be doing an arts residency there where we do storytelling, music, and movement, which will be interesting with high school boys. But we'll see how it goes.
Wow.
Yeah. And then the bigger project is in partnership with Second Street Second Chances, which is the new reentry center. And that's going to be a live show similar to Moving Stories called Hear Me Out with a cast of previously incarcerated community members. So I'm working with 4 men and 4 women. We're just starting. We just started last week with initial rehearsals. And I'm going to be working with them to craft stories from before, during, and after incarceration that we will then weave together with movement, music, and that will premiere September at Barrington Stage at First Year Community College. Yeah.
So many exciting things. Oh my goodness.
It's all good.
It's all good. Did you... Whoa. For someone who didn't have a plan, Jenny, you seem like you have a nice one. This is a nice plan. And it seems fulfilling.
It is. And I'm a very, my nature is just anxious and restless, and I'm always seeking kind of change. And so I don't stick with anything that I don't feel works too long. And I feel like that has facilitated me to just kind of, this thing feels good. I want to do more things like this.
Yeah.
And over time, if you just I've tried to follow that feeling. And I'm really grateful to be able to do these projects now.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I think the impact is going to reverberate in the community. And I think the fusion, right, of the arts with healing. I remember, being in public school, and arts and music were just part and parcel of the educational experience. And, we're lucky to have that still here in Berkshire County, but I know in many places that hasn't been the case. And we have seen the power of the arts to help with our emotional growth, our development, so many things. And so to know that these individuals who have a second chance at life now can go back to something so fundamental and to help them heal and to grow and to, I just love it. I love all of it. And it's so creative. And I love the idea of chaos theory. It's just like my approach to cleaning.
My mom was like, "That's a very off-putting name."
But
You're not going to get funding for that.
It's a conversation starter because the first thing I want to know is, what do you mean by that?
Right.
Right? Like chaos theory, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Like it's about being okay with existing in the unknown and rearranging things and seeing what happens. And my philosophy is that the people who have experienced, maybe more challenging things are the experts on those things and have a lot to teach the rest of the community. And by using the arts to facilitate that conversation and then follow it with public dialogue, we can really kind of come together to figure out how to best move forward and to have that conversation. And I think sometimes those conversations can be difficult, and the arts are, I think, a great way to be exposed to new ideas where it's not just policy or politics, but it's about changing our perception, changing hearts and minds, and then changing our concept of things.
Well, I think if there was any place to do that, it would be here, a place that just loves the arts and where the arts flourish. You're in the right place to do all of that and to continue the work that you've been doing outside of the county. I have to ask, because you're doing work that's fulfilling, but as I'm listening to you and you're hearing these stories, obviously, aren't you hearing a lot of things that are heavy? You're hearing a lot of things that can weigh you down. where do you put all of that? Yeah, you're moving and you're dancing and you're doing all that, but then you almost you get to absorb what you're hearing. What do you do with that?
That's a good question. I'm still figuring that out. Yeah, I mean, I struggle with it, honestly. I have things that I do every day that keep me relatively sane. I work out every morning. I do yoga. I write. I talk to friends and family. I tap dance. My personal philosophy is it's impossible to be unhappy when you tap dance. So I got to get that in. But it's a balance thing.
Yeah.
And I have been struggling with it. And since I'm new to the county, too, I don't really have a community yet. So I'm working on that.
You'll get one.
Yeah.
Jenny, it's the Berkshires. By next year this time, I want to check in with you.
Okay.
Yeah, Jenny be like, Roberta, I have to call you next week because I just have so many calls.
But one thing that does really motivate me when I'm hearing these stories and I'm exposed to these things is these people are dealing with this every day.
Yeah.
How can I, as a facilitator, create an outlet for their emotions and their experiences that feels productive to them, where they can, we're all walking around with these heavy things we've experienced. How can we create something meaningful, productive out of that? And that's where I see my role as facilitator of holding all that heaviness, but turning it into something positive. And it's a balancing act, but when I see the project come to fruition and put on stage, or the public being exposed to these stories and then something positive coming out of it, to me, that is healing. It's healing for me. I hope it's healing for the participants or the cast. And I think it's healing for the public, too. And I think we're all struggling with a lot of stuff. But if we can come together to have those conversations, it can be really beneficial for everyone.
I agree. I think you're right on the money, and the idea of the transparency. We all walk around with some sort of story. We have something that we're dealing with to varying degrees,
for sure.
And some people mask it better. And I think when people hear other people's stories, it gives them permission to feel.
Yeah, and also finding other people who are dealing, because we're all, there's so much overlap.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't know that unless we are coming together to talk about it.
Right.
And I think that's what we need.
Yeah.
Not only at, definitely not only Pittsfield, but as a country, we just need to be all talking to each other.
Yeah. We do. I think along the way we've lost that at times, where we stop talking with each other and we just talk at each other, right? And, being able to be in a setting where we are hearing people's vulnerable stories and experiences, that's transformative.
Yeah, and I'm hoping to also be able to work with people who aren't usually heard from, or feel like no one really cares what they have to say. And I mean, we all feel like that in certain parts of our lives, but working to not only heal but also to we do want to know what you have to say, and we are going to listen, and we need to hear from everyone.
For sure. So you're doing fabulous work, and it's work that obviously now has settled you. For now. And so that's a good thing. When you think back 10 years ago, do you think that Jenny today, would the Jenny of 10 years ago recognize the Jenny of today?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm the same,
You're the same Jenny.
All over the place, restless weirdo.
Okay.
I would say. Still tap dancing.
Oh, gosh.
That's the through line of, since I was 13 years old, just always tap dancing.
Still tap dancing. Well, that's good that you have that continuity. And maybe, like you said, you're restless, but obviously if you look back to that time, there's something that has kept you on this path. So, I mean, maybe 10 years from now, we'll still see you in this work. We'll see chaos theory, and then we'll see maybe some offshoots and different things happening, and there could be a ton of other things happening. So I see a lot of great things happening. And again, if people want to stay in tune with what's happening with all your amazing projects, where can they go?
Yeah, so my website is www.jennyherzog.com, Herzog.
Perfect.
And you can check me out there. And if anyone wants to collaborate, let me know.
And there you have it. So before we go, I just need to find out how Jenny, what she does to unwind, because I mean, every day she's tap dancing, she's, doing yoga, she's doing all these things that the average person, we just do to unwind and all that stuff. So what do you do, Jenny? Climb a mountain?
No. Lately, this is an embarrassing place to leave off, but lately I've been watching Married at First Sight.
Oh, okay.
It's a very riveting and captivating reality show.
Is that like on Bravo or something? It's like on one of those.
Netflix. It's just strangers who get married, and then they have 90 days to decide whether to stay married. So that's what I've been doing.
Riveting.
No judgment, right?
No judgment. Listen, no judgment. I mean, there was one that I was watching. Was it Blind?
Love is Blind.
Love is Blind.
So that's way better than this one.
Yeah, Love is Blind. That one, and I'm talking like the couple seasons ago, not the most recent season, but the seasons before. That one actually got my attention because there are a few couples that actually stayed together. But sometimes you need things that just
shut your mind.
It's not cerebral.
Yeah.
You just need to pass through, right?
Right.
It just goes phew, phew, right there.
Yes.
And that's that kind of programming. Just not heavy. It's just it's
pure emptiness. In the best way.
In the best way. Because sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need it because you know what? There's a lot of heavy stuff, and you need to have that. What motivates you or keeps you going?
The people I meet, the people I work with.
All right.
And a desire to facilitate connection and conversation and move forward. But the people when they share their story with me, it becomes like personal to me. Well, you're trusting me with this. What can I do to move this forward? So that's what motivates me. Yeah.
Okay. And if you had to choose one word to describe you, what would that be?
Chaotic. Of course.
Oh, I could have seen that coming.
Yeah.
But I don't like to make assumptions. Chaotic. All right. Okay. All right, Jenny.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
This was wonderful. You are doing amazing things, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about chaos theory in the months to come. There are a lot of amazing projects, and folks, you know where to find Jenny. So definitely stay connected with her and see what's happening with her and our community partners here in the city of Pittsfield. Everyone, you've been listening to Backstory. Let's hear it on WTBR-FM Pittsfield with Roberta McCulloch-Dews of the Mayor's Office in the city of Pittsfield. Thanks for listening and have a great day.